and seeing things as objective as possible, like being your own judge on the day of trial, which is what trauma can be, a mourning of your own death. When it comes to personal development, one might ask himself one simple question: am I really ready to change? And in this video we will answer this question, or more correctly, we will give some background on what premises are needed in order for a person to transform himself into something new, something better, something next level. Change is a necessary part of any evolutionary process, and the same goes for a physical and mental improvement. Let's dive into it.
Can people change? The question may sound somewhat abstract and disinterested, as if one were asking for a friend or for the universe, but it's likely to be a good deal more personally and painfully motivated than that. We ask typically and acutely when we're in a relationship with someone who's inflicting a great deal of pain on us, someone who's refusing to open their hearts or can never stop lying, someone who's aggressive or detached, someone who's harming themselves or managing to devastate us.
It lies in our nature, egocentric nature, to make people to comply with our will, regardless if that will is only benefiting us. That is a part of our survival. Survival goes far beyond than keeping your physical body from harm. It's about survival of the idea of your persona.
We ask too because the one immediately obvious response to frustration isn't in this case open to us. We're not able to simply get up and go. We're too emotionally or practically invested to give up. Something roots us to the spot. And so, with the example of one troublesome human in mind, we start to wonder outwards about human nature in general, what it might be made of and how malleable it could turn out to be. One thing is likely already to be evident to us. Even if people can change, they certainly don't change easily.
The simplest answer I can give you about change and why people are unwilling to change themselves is because it threatens their ego. Ego is adverse to change, as ego represents a picture of ourselves that is very rigid and non-conformant. It is never wrong, nor does it need to apologize for its behavior. And of course, it's a very simplistic picture of what ego represents. But you get my point. Ego doesn't want to die, and change is what happens to ego when we have to acknowledge our weaknesses and make sure that we develop as human beings.
Maybe they flare up every time we raise an issue and accuse us of being cruel or dogmatic. Maybe they break down late at night and admit they have a problem, but by morning vehemently deny that there could ever be anything amiss. Maybe they say, yes, they get it now, but they don't ever deploy understanding where it really matters. We can at best conclude that by the time we've had to raise the question of change in our minds, someone around us has managed not to change, either very straightforwardly or very gracefully. We might ask a prior question. Is it even okay to want someone to change?
Us wanting to change somebody else but not change ourselves is also a part of ego's survival nature. We want others to succumb to our belief systems so that we can confirm our biases, so that we pat ourselves on the back, making sure that our ways of living is most correct. Also, you have to understand that if there's no change happening in a person's life, that means the person lives in a very comfortable pace, meaning that there's no severe traumatic experiences happening in their lives. Change is oftentimes a consequence of painful personal experience that we go through, and realize that kind of a living strategy doesn't work anymore. So we have to adapt and transform ourselves in order to tackle the adversities of the new world order.
The implication from those who generate trouble for us is most often an indignant no. Love me for who I am is their mantra. But, considered more imaginatively, only a perfect human would ever deny that they might need to grow a little in order more richly to deserve the love of another. For the rest of us, all moderately well-meaning and halfway decent requests for change should be heard with goodwill, and in certain cases acted upon with immense seriousness.
Also, if we want to change someone in a romantic relationship, that means that we are not quite comfortable with what we're having. And if that kind of a situation prevails in a longer time, even after voicing our opinions on how we feel, that we don't feel appreciated and nothing happens, then it's your job to walk away. Staying in that kind of a bond, relationship, is abusive towards ourselves. So before blaming the other person, look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself why I am still here.
Those who bristle at the suggestion that they might need to change are, paradoxically, giving off the clearest evidence that they may be in grave need of inner evolution. Why might change be so hard? It isn't as if the change-resistant person is merely unsure what's amiss and will manage to alter course once an issue is pointed out to them, as someone might if their attention were drawn to a strand of spinach in their teeth. The refusal to change is more tenacious and willed than this. A person's entire character may be structured around an active aspiration not to know and not to feel particular things. The possibility of insight will be aggressively warded off through drink, compulsive work routines, or offended irritation with all those who attempt to spark it.
As I said previously, it's our ego, and in order to be able to change, you have to have higher level of consciousness, of self-awareness, so that you can recognize your lackluster personality and make an attempt to eradicate those behaviors and implement new habits in order to move on and become better. The exact trait that lets us to see our own weaknesses is open-mindedness, and for that we have to have higher level of consciousness, which is basically about not taking yourself too seriously and seeing things as objective as possible, like being your own judge on the day of trial. Only then will you be able to put your ego aside and see things rationally, without taking the side of your ego.
In other words, the unchanging person doesn't only lack knowledge, they are vigorously committed to not acquiring it. And they resist it because they're fleeing from something extraordinarily painful in their past that they were originally too weak or helpless to face and still haven't found the wherewithal to confront. One isn't so much dealing with an unchanging person as first and foremost with a traumatized one. Part of the problem when one is on the outside is realizing what one's up against. The lack of change can seem so frustrating because one can't apprehend why it should be so hard. Couldn't they simply move an inch or two in the right direction? But if we considered at that moment the full scale of what this person once faced and the conditions in which their mind was formed and certain of its doors bolted shut, we might be more realistic and more compassionate. Couldn't they just would no longer quite make sense.
So he talks about traumatic experiences that people had, which makes them to lock down to their own ideals and worldviews, basically implying that those kind of people cling to their past, cling to their wounds and suffering and identify with that. And to letting go of that would mean death. And no, not a physical death, but mental death, which is what trauma can be. Mourning of your own death. But the thing with many people is that they don't process, they don't heal, they do everything but, and their life becomes this torturous experience, an unwillingness to shed those illusions of the past and become present with what is.
At the same time, very importantly, we might not stick around as long as we often do. We should at this juncture perhaps ask ourselves a question that may feel at once unfair and rather tough. Given how clear the evidence is of a lack of change in a certain person, and hence of a lack of realistic hope that our needs are going to be met anytime soon, why are we still here? Why are we trying to open a door that can't open, and returning to a recurring frustration and hoping for a different result? What broken part of us can't leave a lack of fulfillment alone? What bit of our story is being reenacted in a drama of continuously dashed hopes?
Becoming frustrated with someone who refuses to change is really about frustration about yourself. You are seeing the problem, you are identifying the problem, but you are not doing anything to resolve those emotional issues that arise within you. As we previously concluded, people aren't able to change before they experience a kind of a trauma that pushes them into the next step of their evolution. But that will only happen if you're aware enough and can see those barriers that hinder you to prosper and live a profound life. In that case, if you're having a relationship, any kind of a relationship, with a person who is not responding to your suggestions for better communication and overall social experience, then it's up to you to make the decision. You either accept the person as he/she is, or you walk away. Personally, if someone isn't aligning with my values, with how I perceive a quality relationship, I'm letting go. And I will admit that in the past I've been very bad with letting people go. But after embracing loneliness, I am not compromising my well-being. I'm choosing myself, and so should you.
And if we're talking of change, might we one day change into characters who don't sit around waiting without end for other people to change? Might we become better at sifting through options and allowing through only those people who can already meet the lion's share of our needs? In addition, might we become better at deploying a dash of life-sustaining ruthlessness in order, sometimes, to leave those who frustrate and rebuff us? we may need to rebuild our minds in order, with time, to change into people who don't wander for too long if and when people might change.
Exactly what he says in these last sentences, that you shouldn't wait for someone. You should always take your own position and consider your own values and ask yourself these valuable questions, whether you are comfortable enough to compromise your own integrity for the sake of long-lasting relationship. Maybe someone that you have been together with for 5, 10, 15 years. Any kind of a relationship. Friends, romantic relationships, family, doesn't matter. If you are unhappy, everyone around you will be unhappy. Walking away resolves a lot of issues with a lot of people. Tell me about your most memorable moments of change. But for now, Hossein, out.